Oh man, 5 hours total on this thing? Like, I don't know. Is there really anything that can justify that kind of runtime? Whoa! Wow! Whew! Hey folks! Patreon-sponsored review, sort of. This one actually was someone who got in touch with me directly, but basically did a commission through PayPal as opposed to doing it through Patreon, but it's effectively the same thing. So, Baahubali. When I got commissioned to watch this, my initial reaction was, okay. I know nothing about Indian cinema. Zero. Like, I know a little bit about the trappings of Bollywood films, which is to say I've seen Slumdog Millionaire. But the first thing that's worth pointing out is technically this is not a Bollywood film because that's actually not a genre in India. That is specific to films made in Bombay. That's where the term comes from, Bombay, Hollywood, Bollywood. So this isn't actually technically one of those, but it is the highest grossing, well, I think technically the second part, because this was done as two films, is the highest grossing film in India, and the second highest grossing Indian film worldwide. So this was kind of a big deal. I am not gonna try and pronounce like anybody's name, just because I'm gonna butcher it. And it's going to be bad for everybody involved. So let me state that much up front. But like I said, I knew almost nothing about this going in. And I just knew this was long. This was 2 movies at about 2.5 hours each. Whew. So I didn't know what I was going to get. What I got, I am struggling slightly to figure out how to describe it. Let's start with, I'm glad I've seen this. Because, and like, again, this is not going to be a culture perspective. I cannot put any of what I'm about to talk about into the proper context of the country it was made in or the genre that's a part of. I have no background. I just watched this thing cold. And that honestly may be the best way to watch it because I literally have almost nothing else to compare it to. If I really wanted to stretch, I could say, here's what I would say. It brought to mind seeing other foreign films, and this happens to me on occasion. I don't see a ton of foreign films, but on occasions where I see something where I feel like it's really steeped in a culture that I know I'm not a part of. So, to make a comparison that might be slightly odd, watching this, it was kind of like watching the marriage of Kung Fu Hustle and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So, if you've seen those, imagine almost Kung Fu Hustle levels of insanity, but Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon sincerity. Because Kung Fu Hustle, much as I love it, knew it was funny, and knew it was a joke, and knew it was comedy. But this thing is dead serious, but it is nuts. So, okay. Plot. I was actually kind of delighted to find out that this is a completely original plot, because it's presented in a way, and it has the kind of mythic air to it that I initially assumed, and I checked this after watching the first of the 2 films called Baahubali, The Beginning, the other one being Baahubali, The Conclusion. Very snazzy. But after watching the first one, I looked up because I kind of assumed, oh, this must be an adaptation of like long-running legends or myths, because it had the air of like the 10 Commandments or something. It had that kind of, it had all these moments that felt like they were these big, iconic, mythic moments that had always been part of history and were now being put up on screen. And then I find out it's an original creation and an original story. I'm sure probably informed by a lot of mythology and folklore and other cultural stuff from the region that I just don't know about. But strictly speaking, it's not an adaptation of existing stuff, which I was kind of shocked to find out. So, as far as the story goes, this is I suppose technically you could call it a historical fantasy action epic. The fantasy I'm going to put an asterisk on because this isn't like, there aren't like monsters or, gods showing up, or it's nothing like that. But I kind of want to put fantasy on there because the things that human beings are capable of doing, well, I'll make the comparison to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon again. You have to admit to a certain amount of fantasy in that because people are doing things like, yeah, nobody can do that. And that is very much going on here. The core characters, the things that they are capable of, especially in physical combat, is just, it's superhero level stuff. But I wouldn't ever call this a superhero movie. Again, it is a historical setting. It has that more sort of epic vibe, that sort of Ten Commandments, Lord of the Rings sort of feel and vibe to it. So as far as the story goes, it starts out with this baby being, carried away by this woman who is being attacked, and ultimately she dies saving this baby, who is then adopted into this village. And this village, it exists at the bottom of these waterfalls. And these waterfalls go up so high that they go past the clouds, and some of the people in the village wonder if there even is actually a top to those things. So eventually he grows up, and they call him Shiva, but he will eventually find out, title character, Baahubali is both his name and his father. Well, I don't exactly know how naming in Indian culture works, but it is a name both he and his father, who he does not know, have, though they also have different, I don't know if it's considered a first name, but they're both kind of called that. And so he gets up there and he discovers a kingdom being ruled by a tyrant, being fought against by a resistance who is trying to rescue and free this queen that the tyrant has been imprisoning for 25 years. And it turns out that Baahubali is the son of the tyrant's brother who died in order for the tyrant to take power. And it then launches into a very extended flashback. And when I say very extended, I mean about the last hour of the first movie and the first 2 hours of the second movie. Which, that's something that I'm going to acknowledge, but I'm also going to say this is probably largely a cultural thing. Because I actually had, flashbacks that go on that long tend to not sit well with me. But I don't want to judge this one because I honestly have the same criticism of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which has a very extended flashback sequence, not nearly as extended as this. And also Hero did something similar. So I think there's just something about Eastern storytelling that just does that more. But for me, it does kind of take the stakes up because we basically take the end of the first film ends on, it's not really a cliffhanger, but it's a truth bomb. And then it takes the first 2 hours of the second movie to get us to the point we already found out at the end of the first one. Now, it's still nuts and really incredible to watch and fun, but it is a bit like, yeah, but we know where it's... But again, not knowing the cultural context of this kind of storytelling, I'm not going to harp on that too much. So, Baahubali as a character, the actor who plays him, whose name I will put up, because I'm not going to try and pronounce it. The only reason I'm confident in saying Baahubali is because they say it out loud so often in the movie. I actually caught that, the pronunciation on that decently, I think. He is an immensely charming and charismatic presence on the screen. He has one of those smiles that's up there like with John Pertwee and The Rock. The kind of smile that it's just like, oh, and like the screen lights up. Which is actually really good because as a character, especially Baahubali the younger, but also the elder, because they're effectively the same character, not a ton of difference in characterization, just in personal history. Baahubali basically, either one of them, basically is the best at everything. The strongest, the smartest, the most noble, the most compassionate, like everything. The best at everything. Which normally would mark out a boring character. It would mark out a Mary Sue. Effectively, because like literally everything he tries to do, he succeeds. But there's something about the smile that he has. There's something about the joy he takes in accomplishing something. Because even though he can do almost everything, he can't always do it on the first try. He does have to try for some of this stuff, which also helps. But there's a joy in doing well and doing right that exudes off him as a person, which is good because as far as his ability to basically always be the strongest, the smartest, the most clever, etc., it likens to Conan the Barbarian in the books, not so much in the films, but that's very much sort of Conan's shtick too. But thankfully, unlike Conan and Conan derivatives, Baahubali is not a broody bugger. He takes absolute joy in all of this, which is wonderful, again, because like I say, he has that wonderful, vibrant presence that's terrific. And the female characters in these movies are badasses. So, like, I don't really consider this to be spoilers because it's literally the first scene of the movie. But you remember how I said there was the woman who has baby Baahubali? And we see her, traveling with this, and then you see there's an arrow sticking out of her back. Then she gets attacked by these soldiers, and with an arrow in her back, holding a baby, manages to disarm and kill them. Eventually, she gets swept away down the waterfalls, and she's realizing she is going to drown. She can't save herself, but she basically says a prayer and holds the baby up above the water. She is dead. She is drowned, but her arm stays up, holding this kid above water, which is both the kinds of stuff. So, like, I said Baahubali is the strongest and everything else. So, like, helping erect a statue almost by himself, like a friggin' 100-foot tall statue kind of deal. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. And he's not the only one. There's some other very cool characters who did this sort of stuff. He has and this might also be part of the reason why the extended flashback threw me off a bit. But Baahubali the Younger has this really great relationship that he develops with this young woman who's part of the sort of the resistance force, and their sort of courtship scenes I thought were wonderful and fascinating because they kept kind of coming up to the edge of being something that I would have cringed at, but then managed to just slightly sidestep it, largely on the basis of the guy's charm. So, like, I can think of two examples. So they are fighting, and it's not vastly dissimilar from the sword fight in Mask of Zorro, where Zorro kind of eventually disrobes her with the sword. Baahubali is kind of removing parts of her outfit, but he does other things as well. As he like squeezes these berries so his fingers are ready. He wipes her across her lips, so now her lips are red. And he takes he basically applies makeup to her. And that's like, when I realized that was going on, it's like, I'm not sure about that. But then she stops and she looks at herself in this reflective water. And through the performance, and a little bit of footage from before, and suddenly you realize, oh, he's helping her see her own beauty because she doesn't think she's beautiful. But now she's looking at that and going, oh my God, that's me, I didn't know. And all that comes across in performance. And it takes something that could have been kind of skeevy and makes it work. Or another thing, he has a line, like she gets given this task that is incredibly dangerous and all this other stuff. And he has this line where he says, "You are mine now." And I was like, oh God, because I thought he was going to go, "I forbid you to do it." He says, "Your burdens are now my burdens. I will do this." And I realized, oh, okay. So, like, I mean, if you're going to do that angle, that's the kind of noble, decent human being way to do that. Okay, cool. And the thing's just full of that. There was one thing that did sort of genuinely make me uncomfortable. And the end of the first film ends with basically a 45-minute extended battle, which is the action highlight of the entire thing. It's like Helm's Deep scale and really well executed and really cool watching the battle strategy happen in that. And really none of the action scenes after that one quite measure up to it, although other ones are fun later. But anyway, the force that the good guys are fighting against is this collection of actors who have very clearly been darkened as far as their skin tone goes and have had their teeth blackened and are speaking in, I did check, is a made-up and invented language, but that also uses things like clicks and stuff that, at least personally, I've only ever heard in, like tribal African languages. Again, I don't know about the history of, I don't want to call it blackface because I feel like you say blackface, that's a pretty specific thing from American historical culture. So I don't know what else to call it. They clearly darkened up these horrible, skeevy, we need them to appear less human, so it's fine that we kill so many of them kind of characters. And that did make me a little uncomfortable. But again, I don't know about the history of that kind of thing in India. So I don't want to... I'm not going to saddle it with the same baggage that I would an American film because I just don't know. And especially with a film like this, which is, it's not like they were necessarily they weren't making it for an American audience. So, making it an Indian film for an Indian audience, I don't know if that same baggage is there, but it did make me uncomfortable. Beyond that, there's just really great characters. Oh, no, there was one other thing. There is only one character with a physical disability in this, and he's got a shriveled hand, and he is a cowardly, skeevy creep. But if you're going to show a physically disabled character, you can have them be the bad guy, that's fine, but it is a little weird when a film this big with this many characters, only one of them has a disability, and he's this skeevy. It is a little bit like, eh. That one was just like a little bit of a, that didn't bother me as much as the darkened skin thing did. That one did get me a little bit. But so moving on from that, there's a ton of great characters from, the queen mother of Baahubali the Elder and his brother, who is in present time, the current king. The thing is, the timeline is actually totally easy to follow. It's just hard to explain in this sort of video format, rambling as I do. There are multiple great female characters. We will eventually, in the flashback, meet Baahubali the Younger. His mother is a really great character. The courtship between her and Baahubali the Elder, that's really well done. It's really sweet. There is a very honor-bound character who is very clearly a good guy, but is so devoted to doing his duty that he is really conflicted on a lot of stuff. He's really good. The action scenes are incredible. There's a lot of CGI in this, and it's not always convincing CGI, but the whole thing is so heightened, it doesn't need to be photorealistic to still work, and it absolutely works. And being new to Indian cinema, I can confirm, yes, there are large, over-the-top musical numbers pretty much out of nowhere. And they're all great. I have nothing else to say. I loved, when the first one kicked in, and it's actually just this little brief bit of Baahubali the Younger just sort of doing this little dance on his own, while other characters watch him and kind of, do a little bit of keeping rhythm, and the music kicks up, and it all goes into slow-mo. There's a lot of slow-mo in this thing too, but it just, I saw that and my face just lit up. I'm like, this is so much fun. And that's the thing. As long as this is, it is a lot of fun. Now, I did pretty much binge through both these films in a day. You don't have to. It's actually fairly segmented, even like within, say, the 2-hour flashback. It is still broken down into clear segments, like, oh, here's the bit where the brothers are chasing somebody. Here's the bit where Baahubali the Elder is courting this woman. Here's the bit where these characters are battling. So if you want to take it in smaller chunks, the entirety of the thing, it's very doable to watch in that way. It almost has a mini-series feel in a way. You can find places where it segments off every 20 minutes, half hour or so. So if the runtime intimidates you, that is, I think, a perfectly viable way to consider watching these films. But you do need to be prepared to watch both. It's not like you can watch one. It's not like Star Wars A New Hope where it's a complete story. It's like, no, it very much ends unfinished. But I think I'll wrap it up there. Baahubali. I didn't know what this was. I really did enjoy the heck out of it. It's currently on Netflix, so it's available for streaming. Easy to watch, to start to check out. There's no dub, or at least if there was, I don't think there was. I checked on the first one. I didn't check on the second one, but you know, it's good. It's good acting. Give it if you like taking in other cultures' stuff, including their weirdness, give it a shot. I'm glad I got commissioned for this one. Have you seen this thing, or have you heard of it, or do you know anything about Indian cinema? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Bunch of stuff to do as well. Like, subscribe, share this video, support me on Patreon if you are able to. That is a massive, massive help. But any of the other things will do as well. There's a link to my merch store down there. There's links to other things that I do. Click on them, they'll take you places, or don't. Because at the end of the day, you're the council, I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned.